In a world overflowing with noise, shallow takes, and information that evaporates the moment you hear it, Solenius Media exists for one purpose: to give you depth. Whether the subject is philosophy, psychology, history, science, artificial intelligence, literature, or the shape of the future, every series we publish is built on one idea: that thinking clearly is a form of survival. You're listening to a Solenius Media production. Our catalog spans dozens of long-form, story-driven shows, from Western moral philosophy for beginners to pioneers of psychology and psychiatry, from AI and uncertain future to the classical music giants. Each series is crafted to give you more than facts. It gives you the context, the conflict, and the human meaning behind the ideas that shaped our world. If you enjoy this program, explore the rest of our library. Every show is designed to stand alone, but together they form a larger project. A guided tour of the forces, intellectual, emotional, political, technological, that built the world we live in and the world we're about to enter. Visit soleniusmedia.com to discover new series, follow your favorites, and support the work that allows us to create long-form, high-fidelity educational storytelling. Now, let's begin. Produced by Solenius Media, on an Athenian night long after the crowds had left the Agora, when the torches along the colonnades burned low and the city's noise sank into a tired murmur, there was often one figure still awake in the Stoa, a man in his 50s or 60s, short, wiry, with a runner's build and eyes that seemed always slightly narrowed in concentration. Before him, on a low table, lay a disorderly sea of papyrus rolls. His hand moved quickly, almost impatiently, as though the problem was not what to say, but how to say it fast enough before his thoughts outran the ink. Scribes and students would later joke that if all his writings were stacked together, they could bury a man. Ancient sources say he wrote as many as 700 books. Whether or not the number is exact, the impression it leaves is clear. Chrysippus of Soli, the third head of the Stoic school, was a storm of thinking. If Zeno of Citium was the founder of Stoicism and Cleanthes of Assos its living conscience, Chrysippus was its architect and system builder. Later Stoics would say, only half in jest, if there had been no Chrysippus, there would be no Stoa. He took the scattered insights of his predecessors and built them into a tightly woven structure, logic, physics, and ethics interlocking, to understand why Stoicism could survive and spread for centuries, influencing Roman emperors and Christian theologians and modern therapists. You have to spend time with this restless, rigorous mind. Chrysippus was born around 279 BCE in Soli, a town in Cilicia on the southern coast of Asia Minor, near modern-day Mersin. His family seems to have been reasonably well off. One tradition says he inherited property that was later confiscated by the state, an early lesson in the Stoic theme that external goods are unstable. He was also, according to later reports, a competitive long-distance runner in his youth. That detail, even if embellished, fits the man he would become: lean, tenacious, built for endurance in intellectual races that could last years. At some point in early adulthood, he came to Athens, as so many ambitious young men in the Greek world did. There, he fell under the influence of Cleanthes, Zeno's successor. Cleanthes, already elderly, had been shaped by decades of manual labor and austerity. He taught his students less with flashy speeches than with the slow gravity of a life lived in discipline. Chrysippus absorbed this ethos, but his own temperament pushed him in a different direction. If Cleanthes was a stone pillar, Chrysippus was the scaffolding around it, restless, analytical, always adjusting, connecting, revising. He became Cleanthes' most formidable student and eventually his successor as scholar. Head of the Stoic school, where Cleanthes had written relatively little, Chrysippus wrote on almost everything: dialectic, rhetoric, physics, ethics, theology, grammar, the interpretation of poetry, the nature of fate. Most of these works are lost. What we have are fragments and reports from later authors, enough to sketch his intellectual profile, but not enough to hear his voice directly. We are left, like archaeologists, with foundations and scattered stones. Reconstructing a building we know was once magnificent, Chrysippus took very seriously the Stoic commitment to a tripartite philosophy: logic, physics, and ethics, each necessary for the others. Logic, he argued, is the tool that keeps us from falling into error. Physics tells us what kind of world we inhabit. Ethics tells us how to live well within that world. You cannot, he insisted, have a sound ethics without a clear grasp of how things hang together. Nor can you understand the world without learning how to argue and distinguish good reasoning from bad. So he began with logic, and here his originality shines. Earlier thinkers, like Aristotle, had developed a theory of syllogisms, arguments built from terms like all humans are mortal. Chrysippus shifted the focus from terms to whole propositions, from human and mortal to if it is day, it is light, or either it is day or it is night. He explored conditionals, disjunctions, negations, and their combinations with a subtlety that some historians see as a forerunner of modern propositional logic. You knew today say, if A, then B, not B, therefore not A. You are using a pattern that Chrysippus would have recognized and carefully classified. For Chrysippus, logic was not an abstract game. It was a weapon against confusion. The human mind, he thought, is constantly bombarded with impressions and arguments, some valid, some specious. Without training in how to test inferences, we fall prey to sophists, demagogues, and our own wishful thinking. A wise person must be able to say, this follows, that does not, and stand firm even when the crowd is persuaded by glittering rhetoric. In a sense, Chrysippus was building a mental shield for the Stoic sage. He also wrestled with some of the most difficult puzzles of language and thought. The Stoics distinguished between three things: the sounds we make when we speak, the physical objects we refer to, and something in between they called lecta, that which is said, the meaning or content of an utterance. When I say it is day, there is the sound of the words, the actual physical arrangements of sun and earth and sky, and the proposition that it is day, which can be true or false. Lecta are not physical objects, but they are not pure mental figments either. They are the things that can be the bearers of truth and falsity. Chrysippus worked out how these lecta are structured, how they relate to statements, and how complex thoughts can be built from simpler ones. This may sound remote from ethics, but it connects directly to the Stoic focus on assent. For the Stoics, impressions, fantasiae, strike the soul constantly. Some are true, some false. The crucial moment in any moral situation is when the ruling part of the soul either gives or withholds assent to an impression. This is good. This is bad. This is to be done. Those assents are in effect commitments to lecta, to the proposition that wealth is good, or death is terrible, or helping this person is appropriate. If our understanding of meaning and inference is sloppy, we will assent to badly formed or incoherent lecta, and so warp our character. Chrysippus's work on logic and lecta is, in this sense, a deep foundation for Stoic therapy of the soul. He did not shy away from paradoxes. The famous liar paradox, this statement is false, interested him. So did the Sorites paradox, where adding or removing one grain from a heap seems not to make a difference, but repeated often enough plainly does. If you remove one hair from a head, it does not make a man bald. If you remove another, likewise. So when does he become bald? These puzzles are not just intellectual toys. They expose limits in the way our concepts and language latch onto the world. Chrysippus tried to chart these boundaries, sometimes by making fine distinctions about when a statement has a definite truth value and when it does not, sometimes by insisting that we must accept sharp cutoffs, even where our intuitions resist them. The discipline of moral judgment, for him, is always threatened by vagueness and ambiguity. The clearer we can be about what we are actually saying, the less likely we are to drift into self-deception. If logic was Chrysippus's scalpel, physics was the living body he dissected and described. Stoic physics, as he inherited it, taught that the cosmos is a single, living, rational organism permeated by pneuma, a kind of divine, fiery breath that gives form and cohesion to matter. This pneuma is also the logos, the rational principle that orders all things. The entire universe is a cyclical process. It comes into being, develops, burns up in a cosmic conflagration, ekporosis, and is reborn forever. According to the same rational pattern, within this cosmic animal, everything that happens is bound tightly by cause and effect. Nothing is uncaused, nothing is random. Fate, for Chrysippus, is not a chain imposed from outside, but the total interlocking network of causes and effects that constitutes the world. Such a view raises a sharp problem. If everything is fated, if every event follows necessarily from prior causes, what becomes of human freedom and moral responsibility? How can it make sense to praise or blame, to command or forbid, if no one could ever have done otherwise? Chrysippus faced this question head-on. He refused to back away from determinism. To him, the idea of uncaused events was nonsense, but he also refused to abandon the reality of moral agency. His solution anticipated, in some ways, what modern philosophers call compatibilism, the view that free will and determinism can coexist. One of his favorite analogies was that of a cylinder pushed along a surface. The initial push sets the cylinder in motion, but the fact that it rolls rather than slide or sit still is due to its own nature, its roundness. Similarly, external impressions and circumstances push us, but how we respond depends on the character we have developed. Fate includes both the external causes and the internal dispositions. When a person acts unjustly, the act is indeed part of the fated chain, but so is the inner configuration of their soul that made assent to that unjust impression natural for them. Responsibility lives in that configuration. Chrysippus also spoke of events being co-fated. It may be fated, for example, that a person recovers from an illness, but it is co-fated that they recover by calling the doctor. Taking medicine, resting. Fate does not make our efforts irrelevant. Rather, it weaves them into the necessary tapestry. In moral terms, it may be fated that a person becomes virtuous or vicious, but this happens through the series of assents, reflections, and habits that are, from the inside, their own doing. To live as a Stoic is to recognize that everything is fated, and still to see your own rational choices as the node at which cosmic necessity passes through you. From this physics and logic, Chrysippus drew a sharply defined ethics. Like Zeno and Cleanthes, he held that the only thing that is good in itself is virtue, a well-ordered soul that understands and loves what is truly valuable. Everything else belongs to the category of indifferent things: health, wealth, reputation, pleasure, pain, even life and death. These may be preferred or dispreferred indifference. Health is preferable to sickness, all else being equal, but they do not make or break the goodness of a life. The virtuous person can live well in a palace or in prison, in good health or in illness, because their goodness resides in their rational alignment with nature, not in the furniture of their circumstances. Chrysippus refined the Stoic account of how we get from raw nature to mature virtue. He elaborated the doctrine of oikeiosis, appropriation or familiarization. Every animal, he said, has an inborn attachment to itself. A newborn creature immediately seeks what sustains it and avoids what harms it. This primitive self-love is not selfishness in the moral sense. It is the basis of survival. As humans grow, equipped with reason, this self-concern expands and changes. First, we learn to care for our bodies and simple needs. Then we learn to care for our social roles, as children, siblings, citizens. Finally, if our development goes well, we come to recognize all rational beings as akin to us, sharing in the same logos. Our circle of concern expands outward from self to family, to community, to humanity. Virtue, in this picture, is not a denial of self-concern, but its rational fulfillment. To live according to nature is to act in ways that are coherent with this expanded sense of what is truly one's own. Justice is not a contract we grudgingly accept. It is the recognition that the good of others, as rational beings, is bound up with our own. The wise person, for Chrysippus, does not treat the suffering of others as a regrettable but irrelevant side effect of their own pursuit of tranquility. They see themselves as a limb of a larger body. To injure another limb is to injure the whole. At the same time, he was ruthless in his analysis of the passions. Like earlier Stoics, he saw emotions not as raw feelings, but as value-laden judgments. Fear is the judgment that something bad is about to happen. Anger is the judgment that one has been unjustly wronged and that revenge is appropriate. Grief is the judgment that something truly bad has already occurred. Since only vice is genuinely bad and only virtue truly good, such judgments rest on mistakes. To feel intense fear at the prospect of losing money, or rage at an insult, or crushing grief at the death of someone, is to reveal that one has attached ultimate value to things that are, in fact, indifferent. Chrysippus did not thereby counsel coldness or indifference in the emotional sense. He distinguished between pathe, the disruptive passions, and euthethei, right or good feelings. The wise person, he thought, will feel joy, chara, when acting virtuously, caution, eulobeia, about the possibility of doing wrong, and rational wishing, bolesis, for what is genuinely in accordance with nature, including the flourishing of others. What the sage will not feel is the violent turmoil that comes from mistaken valuations, the panic that treats every loss as annihilation, the consuming resentment that holds on to injury, the overwhelming sorrow that denies the inevitability of death. This ethical picture may sound austere, but for Chrysippus, it was deeply therapeutic. He saw philosophy as medicine for the soul. Logic cleansed our reasoning. Physics gave us a stable sense of our place in a rational whole. Ethics taught us how to reorient our desires. Together, they aimed to produce a person capable of maintaining inner steadiness amid outer turbulence. Not a stone, but someone who can be moved without being broken. Chrysippus himself was anything but dry. Later gossip paints him as intense, sometimes irritable, occasionally given to sharp jokes. One famous story, almost certainly legendary but too vivid to ignore, says that he died of laughter. An old man by then, he supposedly saw a donkey eating figs and shouted, "Give the donkey a cup of wine to wash them down." Then, laughing at his own joke, he passed out and never woke up. Whether or not this is literally true, it captures something about how posterity imagined him, an ascetic thinker capable of delight, a man whose mind was sharp enough to see human folly clearly, and yet still capable of amusement. He also had blind spots. His commitment to a tightly ordered cosmos sometimes led him to defend positions that, to us, look like hard determinism bordering on fatalism. He insisted that even seemingly trivial events were fated and meaningful within the whole. He accepted, along with other Stoics, that the cosmos would periodically be destroyed and reborn in exactly the same form, down to the smallest detail, a doctrine that implies each of us and each of our choices has already happened infinitely many times and will happen infinitely many times again. This eternal recurrence is not, in his view, an argument for futility, but an expression of the perfect rationality of the whole. A good cosmos, he thought, would repeat its script. From the standpoint of your series on Western moral philosophy, Chrysippus is crucial because he transforms Stoicism from a set of noble maxims into a dense, interconnected system that can compete with Platonism and Aristotelism. He takes the Cynic insight that virtue is the only good, the Socratic concern for the examined life, the Zeno-Cleanthes vision of living according to nature, and he roots them in a sophisticated account of reason, language, and causality. Without Chrysippus, Stoicism might have remained a somewhat rough practical ethos. With him, it becomes a fully fledged worldview. He also marks a significant moment in the history of the idea of natural law. By insisting that the same logos that orders the cosmos is present in human reason, and that goodness consists in aligning our choices with that logos, he lays groundwork for the later notion, developed by Cicero, Roman jurists, and Christian theologians, that there is a law written in the heart of every rational being, higher than any particular city's statutes. When modern political documents speak of self-evident truths or rights grounded in human nature, they echo, however distantly, a Stoic confidence that reason can discern a moral order not reducible to local customs. At the same time, Chrysippus forces us to confront a tension that still haunts moral philosophy, between seeing the world as a rational, meaningful whole and acknowledging the apparent randomness and cruelty of events. He chose unwaveringly the side of order. Even suffering, for him, fits into a providential pattern, either as a consequence of vice or as material for the exercise of virtue. That stance can be both comforting and exasperating. Comforting because it suggests nothing is senseless, exasperating because it seems to impose purpose on pain that, to those enduring it, feels anything but purposeful. Modern readers may find more resonance in his psychological insights than in his cosmic metaphysics. His emphasis on examining our judgments before yielding to our feelings, his insistence on distinguishing what is under our control from what is not, his focus on habituation and practice, these all reappear in contemporary cognitive behavioral therapies, often explicitly indebted to Stoic sources. When a therapist asks a client to question the belief, if I lose this job, my life is over, they are, in a way, doing Chryssippian work, identifying a faulty lecton and inviting a different assent. And yet, Chrysippus would remind us, the point of all this examination is not merely personal comfort. It is to become the kind of person who can contribute to the rational and social life of the whole. The Stoic sage, in his vision, is not a recluse. He or she is someone fully at home in the world, fulfilling roles as citizen, friend, parent, or leader with integrity, while never confusing those roles with their deepest identity as a fragment of logos. To be such a person is rare. The Stoics themselves admitted the ideal sage might be as uncommon as the phoenix. But the rarity does not negate the value of the ideal. It serves as a compass bearing, even when we know we will never arrive exactly at the pole. Imagine, then, Chrysippus back under the dim torchlight of the Stoa, surrounded by rolls of papyrus. He is writing furiously about conditional propositions, then suddenly breaks off to argue that the wise person will not be thrown into turmoil by insult. He sketches an elaborate chain of causes, then pauses to tell a student that it is better to endure poverty with courage than to gain wealth by flattery. He draws a diagram of how impressions strike the soul and become assent, then looks up to remind his listeners that this very moment, a late night, a tired teacher, a few stubborn students, is part of the cosmic story they are studying. In his intensity and his relentlessness, he embodies a particular image of the philosopher, not a detached observer floating above the world, nor a wandering provocateur like Diogenes, but a craftsman inside the world, trying to make thought itself a precise, reliable instrument for living. He does not promise that this instrument will banish pain or guarantee success. He promises that it will make us less easily fooled by others, by appearances, by ourselves. For a listener moving through the history of moral philosophy, Chrysippus is both a challenge and a resource. The challenge is to take seriously his demand for coherence between what we say about the world and what we do in it, between the values we profess and the values revealed in our emotional reactions. The resource is the toolkit he offers, ways of analyzing arguments, of clarifying concepts, of situating our lives in a larger intelligible pattern. Whether or not we follow him all the way into cosmic conflagrations and eternal recurrences, we can still learn from the way he refused to let ethics float free of logic and physics. In a time like ours, where information comes faster than reflection, where arguments are often replaced by slogans, where emotions are marketed and manipulated on a massive scale, Chrysippus' stubborn insistence on thinking carefully before assenting looks less like pedantry and more like self-defense. To pause and ask, what exactly am I believing here? What implicit proposition am I endorsing? Is it true? Does it fit with a broader, coherent view of the world? That is, in a sense, to sit again at his crowded table in the Stoa, under the dim torches, and let the third Stoic master teach.
Midnight rails under silver moon, dusty boots on a winding road. A shadow's the only friend I've known since she packed up and let me go. empty whiskey bottle on the sea. Her laugh still echoes in my bones. Saddle's heavy with memories. I ride alone where the wind still blows. Nowhere else to be. 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 Sunrise paints the horizon gold, but it don't warm a lonesome soul. Every town I pass feels half her size. Every trail's haunted by goodbye. I whisper prayers to open skies, hoping someday my heart'll find a brand new path beyond the pain, where broken hearts can heal in time. Nowhere else to be. 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 Nowhere else to be.